Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I think we're on episode 198 of Blowback, Exposing Imperial Decline. I've got my special co-host, well, you're my only co-host, Ian. I guess you're special. Ian Kummer, streaming live from a suburb in Moscow, but he's actually in his dacha in Crimea at the moment. And our title for our 198th episode is, will J.D. Vance remove Trump with the 25th Amendment? It's a little bit of hyperbole. I'm not sure we're quite there yet. We definitely conceivably could arrive there, but the short answer to that question is probably not today. But definitely the first order of business is my erroneous prediction, my entirely wrong prediction, that today we would see $150 a barrel gas. I was truly believing Trump when he made these threats to just attack Iran and destroy them and bomb them back to the Stone Age and overnight destroy their civilization. I believe that he was, frustrated and ready to do that thing that I really believe is going to happen at some point. But turns out that was not the case, right? So Trump probably had two things in mind with his hyperbolic, vociferous, hostile, war crime-like threats and allegations against Iran. Number one, he was probably hoping to make some more money for him and his friends. He knew that his hyperbole was going to, skyrocket the price of oil, which it went up to like $116 that morning. And then he also knew that, if he was able to declare some kind of diplomatic measures, it would crash. And so that's exactly what happened. He built it up with his bluster, and then his assertion that diplomacy was at hand, caused it to crash. And there are reports that there was many moves prior to the statement of diplomacy, which allowed people to cash out on this huge move in the oil markets. But I want to keep in mind the big picture, the grand strategy that's taking place. And, with that in mind, with this big picture in mind, we can make better sense of what's going on and what happened then on Tuesday. So, the Western Empire, is under threat from China, Iran, and Russia. These are the primary obstacles to full spectrum dominance, total global hegemony, control over every government, market, and resource on the planet throughout the rest of the 21st century. Like, this is what the Western Empire is after. And the United States, our military, our economy is their primary vehicle to achieve, the hegemony, which is being pursued by this class of transnational oligarchs. Iran refers to them as the Epstein class, which is not far off the mark. And so, they're engaged right now in a decades-long effort to go after these impediments, these obstacles to their global rule. And, I think it's worthwhile to take a second and just look at these long developed plans, long written down plans that cross administrations. We can call them regimes. And there's this continuity of agenda that, goes from all the way from Obama to Biden to Trump and then to Trump again. And so it's useful to understand that. So, for instance, there's this document called Which Path to Persia that talks about trying to engage Iran in diplomacy in order to declare them being obstinate, and which in turn will justify sanctions and then after sanctions have been, afflicting their economy, then we can open up a war with them, using our proxy Israel. And so, if you think of, they laid out like a three strategy approach, right? So first, engage in diplomacy, and then declare them intransigent. Use that as a pretext for sanctions, and then after they're weakened with sanctions, use Israel as the proxy to initiate a hot war, violent conflict. So we're at the third stage of that, and again, that started under Obama, and so, this morning I see this from Telegram, right? So UK PM Keir Starmer indirectly admits that they are working on a coalition that will try to open the Straits of Hormuz by military means. He says he is actively in coordination with Donald Trump to build a 30-nation coalition to force open the Strait of Hormuz. They are using the ceasefire as a cover to prepare for a massive escalation against Iran. So, that kind of, and that was just this morning on Telegram. But if that's true, and it probably is, it's completely in line with this, this over a decade long strategy to deal with Iran. And so there's
Well, I don't know. I mean, is it though? I mean, because we had Obama who made the Iran nuclear deal, and Trump came into office, and I don't remember the exact year he canceled it, but I guess, but he came into office 10 years ago. And Biden had, I mean, I would say I would say the major piece of evidence for your statement that's consistent, continuous policy from one administration to the other is the fact that Biden did not put the deal back in place, even though Iran was open to it when he came into office. And the justification was that there was right-wing pressure, there was Republican pressure that Biden didn't want to appear weak on Iran. And there was a lot. I mean, there was a lot of criticism from the right side of the aisle that Biden's, he's going soft on Iran. He loves Muslims. He loves, the usual crap you hear from the Fox News crowd. So I don't know. I don't know if that's deliberate policy or if they just were too scattered or I don't know what's going on. I don't know if it's as opposed to deliberate bipartisan. Is it correct to call it deliberate bipartisan policy? I'm not completely sure that's true.
Let me finish my presentation, and I'll wrap it up with the events this week, and then I want to hear your response for sure. Okay. But no, I mean unfortunately my presentation is long and I haven't practiced it, but I got two more points to hit on. So number one was the assertion I made about Iran and about how even what Keir Starmer said this morning is completely in line with this long written down strategy, long pursued strategy that transcends different regimes, different U.S. regimes. And then I want to point out about how in China it's the same thing, right? So there's Operation Force Something 2030, and it's all about retooling the Marine Corps and removing, changing their makeup from armor, which with things like tanks and artillery, and turning them into a missile force that is great for interdicting shipping, and placing them in the first island chain in the South China Sea, and putting them in place in order to have a future ability to interdict Chinese imports of energy and exports of manufacturing goods. So this has been going on, also since over 6 years ago, this plan to retool the Marine Corps, put them in place around China in order to have the ability to, enact an embargo against China. And that's something that's also spanned administrations and has been, heavily invested in, right? There's been policies written. And I mean, these things don't just happen, out of the blue. Like, these are strategies that are being pursued. So we can see the strategy going on against Iran. We can see the strategy going on against China. Even though we haven't actually seen it heat up against China, we see perpetual talk about the U.S. wanting to focus and pivot to China. So that brings up the last theater, which is Russia. So in Russia, you always hear Donald Trump say, we need to, be friends with Russia. We need to leave NATO, right? He talks a lot about leaving NATO. Now, he's saying this all the while the U.S. continues to prosecute a proxy war against Russia using Ukraine, right? But all of this talk about, hey, wouldn't it be nice to be friends with Russia and to leave NATO, and all of his hostility and belligerence to Europe, what function does that serve? So that serves the obvious function of allowing the oligarchs, the European oligarchs that own Europe, to justify turning their welfare states into warfare states. The oligarchs aren't happy about all this money that goes and gets spent on welfare for the well-being of European workers. They have no interest in that. They want that done away with. And Trump is offering them, a justification to do that. And they can cite national security, the threat from Russia, and the idea that the United States has abandoned them in order to force them into, abandoning their welfare state, slashing spending on social welfare, and funding a military, doubling their military spending and creating a military force that, may or may not at some future point be told to go, die on the Russian front. So we see that the United States is trying to extricate itself, hand the Russian docket over to Europe, which is what Pete Hegseth said when he went to Europe and talked about a division of labor. You guys are gonna handle Russia. We're gonna pivot to China. Before that, we're gonna deal with Iran. So these are the strategies that the West has, in pursuit of their global dominance, their global hegemony, and in defeating the obstacles to their hegemony. And when we read this morning about Keir Starmer, using this, whatever it is, you can call it a ceasefire. It kind of is, it kind of isn't, in order to reload, prepare for a much bigger attack against Iran. What comes to mind? Does this look like the West is resigning themselves to live in peace and mutual prosperity with the rest of the world? Or are they just, messing around and feeling their way as they implement this, full-scale global effort to control it and to put pressure and defeat, the intransigent, what is that word? Sovereign rivals. So they're intransigent sovereign rivals in Iran, China, and Russia. So to me, it's obvious that this agenda continues full speed ahead. As they come up against obstacles, they retool, they readjust, and then they recommit themselves. So, ideally, these three powers just surrender, right? This is the ideal. Ideally, Russia, China, and Iran hand over their sovereignty to the United States. They allow the United States to dictate who their government's going to be and what their policies are. And then we can all live happily ever after. That's what the West wants. Until Iran, Russia, and China do that, the United States will continue to put pressure. And we can see this pressure escalating in the form of military belligerence, obviously against Russia, now against Iran. And soon we will see embargoes and things like that against China. That's just what is going to happen. And this is going to happen whether or not people understand it, whether or not people realize what's going on. But this is the reality of the situation. Now, the only thing that is going to stop the West and get them to, to say, okay, maybe we'll stop doing this. Maybe we will stop our pursuit of global hegemony. Maybe we'll stop trying to, destroy militarily. Right now, Iran and Russia, and in the future, China, is a defeat, right? That's the only thing. And so I don't really see this defeat coming until they really attempt to do what they are going to do against China. And I think that will result in a global economic catastrophe. And so that global economic catastrophe could happen sooner. It could happen before they even get to China. But without a doubt, you're not going to embargo China without, collapsing the global economy. Like, those two things are the same. An attack on China is an attack on the global economy, because China's the number one trade partner for most of the world. But so, and again, I expect that even with Iran, you're not going to defeat Iran without without causing a regional catastrophe where all of the oil production in the region goes offline. And again, that's what Trump was threatening last Tuesday, and he didn't do it. He backed away. But this threat to to destroy Iran and to reduce their power as a regional obstacle to our hegemony is not something that can happen without Iran retaliating and destroying all the oil production in the Gulf states. So this is it's gonna happen, right? So what I predicted on Tuesday did not happen on Tuesday, but it will happen, and it can happen sooner rather than later. It inevitably will happen if the United States continues to pursue the overthrow of Iran and the destruction of Iran. And they have not stopped. This ceasefire isn't a reverse course of all of these plans. So it's just we're seeing them retooling, figuring out. And here's what I wrote in my recent post, right? So diplomacy. Why do you want to pretend to engage in diplomacy? Well, you want to find more targets. You want to be able to use your intelligence abilities to identify who's doing the diplomacy, who are they talking to, how are they sending those orders to the military, and so you're finding command and control centers. You're understanding their new hierarchy, their new government network, their new leadership networks. And so, so diplomacy can be a great tool to identify targets for decapitation strikes, for assassination. And when the war erupts again, you want new targeting data, the command and control centers and things like that. So that's what I see going on right now. I mean, it's not diplomacy. And like you said, I mean, the war still is continuing. I mean, Israel continues to bomb Hezbollah. Iran is launching strikes, a lot less strikes, but they were still hitting Kuwait, different spots in Kuwait and Bahrain maybe. And I think they're getting hit too some. So, it's not really a ceasefire. It's a weird lull in hostilities. Now, the thing is, Saturday, J.D. Vance was supposed to meet with a Iranian coalition, an Iranian diplomatic coalition. I don't know if that's going to happen. Do you have any thoughts or understanding on exactly what's going to happen on Saturday, Ian?
No, I just heard that it's going to involve JD Vance directly.
Yes.
So yeah, so was that your presentation? I don't want to.
Yeah, that concludes my presentation.
Okay, so. Well, okay, so guys, I just want to welcome to the show. Those of you who missed the first few minutes, we are Billy Bob started off with his analysis of what's gone on so far, and since we have some viewers, I want to recap on what's happened so far. And Billy Bob Hey guys, so we seem to have some technical difficulties. If everyone can hear me, we lost Billy Bob for a second. I got logged out. I think it's a server issue with the service we use. So we're going to wait for Billy Bob to come back, and I am going to give a recap of what's happened so far. So the most recent, our Tuesday stream, we asked, was this a Trump capitulation to Iran? Now, there's been some back and forth since then, and it looks like it was more complicated than that, because in Trump's initial Truth Social message, he told everyone that he found Iran's 10 points peace deal agreeable. Excuse me, I'm just messaging Billy Bob on Facebook to see if he's going to come back. But anyways, well, since then, Trump has clarified, and his press secretary have clarified that the 10 points are not agreeable, and there are allegations that the Pakistani mediators misrepresented the agreeable both parties, both the American party and the Iranian party. And also, not the announcement, I don't think it even went a couple of hours before there were more Israeli strikes on Lebanon, and they announced that the ceasefire does not apply to Lebanon. And Iran, in response to that, kept the strait closed. However, it does seem that the ceasefire is holding, at least for the USA and for Iran, and the preparatory talks have started. Now it is kind of strange because Israel's participating in the talks, but is insistent that Lebanon is not included in the ceasefire arrangement, which is, according to Iran, not true. So that's a big dispute. And Billy Bob is back. Billy Bob, can you hear me? I don't know. The guys who are in the channel, who are watching, can you hear me? Because I've not received any comments for a few minutes, so I'll make sure I'm not just talking into the wind here. However, guys, I apologize. We're having some serious... Okay, good. So someone said yes, you can hear me. Okay, so I'm going to keep talking. I don't know what's going on with Billy Bob, and I apologize. I was caught off guard by these technical issues. But anyways, no, we can't. Okay, yes. So Jace, we can't hear Billy yet. He might just be having internet issues. And thanks for chiming in, everybody. Oh, and Billy Bob is back. It looks like you switched to your phone.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it happens. That's happened to me too. I've cut out and then had to switch to a different device. So I was just recapping on what's happened so far. I mentioned that Trump claimed to have found the Iranian 10 points deal agreeable, which confused a lot of people because that's tantamount to is basically a surrender on Trump's part, and that's even what I called it. And my other prediction that I had made on the Tuesday post on readingjunkie.com on the website was that it was basically, if it's true and Trump did in fact find those 10 points agreeable, it's basically it's a surrender. It's literally worse than a status quo before the war started. And it gives Iran everything they wanted, so it would be a defeat. So it confused a lot of people that Trump would say that, but since then he's clarified, no, he doesn't find their points agreeable. But the talks are continuing, and the price of oil and gas has dropped in response to the ceasefire, even though The strait is not open. Only one oil tanker passed through today. Now that we're kind of caught up, I want to bring up my points for today. So today, in today's post, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, guys. The title of today's post for this stream is "Will J.D. Vance remove Trump with the 25th Amendment?" So that's your clickbait title for you. And I cite two different articles that came out on April 7th. The first one was a piece by the New York Times. And Billy Bob, you have a lot of feedback, so I'm just gonna. Do you want to mute yourself unless you want to talk?
Okay, so you're getting feedback from me?
Yeah. But anyways, so the first post I cite is from the New York Times, which basically says that it was the Israel lobby, it was Netanyahu's and the Israeli lobby that really pushed for war, and the neocons and all the mainstream conservatives in Trump's administration, the military, the intelligence community, the State Department, the vice president were all against it, but Trump was persuaded by basically the Zionist element to go through with the war, and Netanyahu's team had delivered promises that the Iranian government would collapse, their military capabilities would collapse, and the strait would remain open. And it's claims that that Rubio and Vance found this idea to be farcical, and that's the word, quote unquote, that the New York Times used. And CNN had around the same time published an article suggesting that they could that there are, if there's a group movement behind it, they could even use the 25th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution to claim that Trump is medically unfit to be president. So basically, the whole premise here that's being pushed by these two, because the New York Times is a regime mouthpiece, CNN is a regime mouthpiece. They're both, interestingly, pro-Israel. And so the theory being floated right now is that this war went a lot more badly than anyone anticipated. And the idea as part of damage control is to blame it all on Trump to save face, to say the rest of the government wasn't our idea. It was Trump's idea, make him the bad guy. And so I'm not convinced, and I say that in my article, that I'm not convinced it's going to go that far to invoke the fourth clause of the 25th Amendment, because well, it would take a lot. I mean, that amendment was enacted, I think it was in 1967 that was enacted. Oh, what'd you do? I think you changed things. Hold on. Hold on.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So
I was trying to make it bigger for my little phone. Go ahead.
Yeah. So that amendment was put in place for the contingency that the president is seriously ill or injured, but doesn't die, but is incapacitated, so physically cannot govern or make decisions. Like Eisenhower.
Kind of like Biden last year.
Right. Well, what's interesting about Biden is he had stage 4 cancer. He likely had cancer even before he started his campaign.
Must have been brain cancer.
Well, it was prostate cancer, which is almost the same thing in Biden's case. With his ass, it seems like. But so I'm skeptical because that would require, the majority of the cabinet to turn against Trump, and I'm not sure. Since Trump was picking, it's possible that he's alienated enough people for that to happen, but I'm personally of the opinion that it's unlikely they'll actually remove him that way. However, it's possible they will paint Trump as a bad guy, and when the Republican Party gets hosed, in the midterms, and it's possible he'll even, if the Democrats have a majority, I think it's not unlikely they'll try to impeach him. And if Trump is removed, and the other advantage to waiting until after the midterms, if Trump is removed from office more than 2 years into his term, that means J.D. Vance can run twice. If he were to take office right now, today or tomorrow, he would only be able to run once. I remember I looked that up because we had, interestingly, the similar question with Biden and Kamala Harris, almost the same thing. What if Biden doesn't make it? And that was the consensus. They want to wait 2 years so they could put Kamala in at least so she could run twice. I mean, that's likely going to be something similar with J.D. Vance if that happens. However, I'm not so sure. I don't think they'll actually invoke the 25th Amendment, but they will, and they are painting Trump as the main guy who got everybody into it. And frankly, Trump's not helping himself with these crazy, if you want to set up a fall guy, it's great when that guy himself is dumb enough to, paint himself into that corner, which I think is what Trump's been doing. And Deborah has a comment here. I think Trump might duck the neocons, but he will not take the blame. Doggy dog. Well, the thing is, Trump is not that. Honestly, he's not that smart. I mean, and he's he's also not a professional politician too. He's a businessman. He never did anything political until he ran for president. So I think it's going to be very easy to manipulate him into being the fall guy if that's the plan. Now, Billy Bob is back on his main computer. Good. However, I do want to address some of the points you made in your portion. One, I wouldn't consider Israel an appendage of the USA because, well, I mean, if they're an appendage, why are they ignore? I do think it's true the USA wants this ceasefire to not be broken. It would like the Strait to be open. But Israel is doing their own thing. I mean, I don't think there's a complete alignment between Israel and the USA. They don't even have a formal alliance or partnership like NATO does, because Israel is not in NATO. They don't have any kind of military partnership with Israel, so they're not really even a formal ally. And they don't have a pattern of respecting U.S. policy or decisions. So it's like, on what basis can we say that Israel is the proxy in this situation? What's the basis for saying that? I guess.
Yeah, I mean, and this is the long debated, disagreement with a lot of people, so. It's interesting. I mean, I don't think there's any rational way to view Israel in any other way than as a proxy. Like, they can't do anything without the United States. They're dependent on the United States for their very existence. And that's why they're a proxy. And I think that, the belief that Israel does its own thing in opposition to U.S. interests is just based on a fundamental misunderstanding of what U.S. interests are. And it's not true, right? Like Israel and the United States collaborate, and they exploit this perception of nation states, and Israel has its own thing to further their shared interests, and so their shared interest is defeating Iran, right? Israel and the United States want to defeat Iran, and they're working together to do that, and they haven't given up that effort. This ceasefire thing is an effort to give up, trying to defeat Iran. So yeah, no, I like the idea of Trump as a fall guy. I wonder if okay, you're still there. So, and I predicted this, right? Because Trump is great to implement all these policies that are not going to be popular. And that's why the ruling establishment wants him and likes him in place, because they can just blame him personally for everything that they know needs to be done, but they don't want to take credit for because it's not going to be popular. And so, again, I thought, some real unpopular things were going to go down on Tuesday, and they didn't. But I still am quite certain that, in the future, Trump will initiate some very unpopular things. Now, Trump probably wants to be able to say, look, it's not my fault all these unpopular things are happening. It's not my fault the global economy is collapsing. And for sure, if he would have done it on Tuesday, everybody would have blamed him personally. So he's trying to negotiate circumstances and, realign things so that in the future, he'll be able to blame Iran more, or even Israel, right? Even, he'll just be able to blame Israel, because that's another trick they play, on humanity, where they pretend that, Israel is just a sovereign state, man. We can't control Israel, man. And it's nonsense. It is fucking nonsense, because without U.S., largesse, Israel would cease to exist tomorrow. So anyway, I think we're gonna see how things play out, and they're going to, they're moving their way across the river, feeling the stones one step at a time, and they're taking their time, and they're not going to be in a hurry to crash the global economy. But if we understand that to get to the other side, that they will not get to the other side unless they crash the global economy, we know at some point the global economy will crash, because again, you simply cannot harm China. You cannot weaken China. You cannot contain China without a significant, serious, catastrophic disruption to global commerce, simply because China is the number one trade partner of almost the entire world. So at some point it's going to happen. And again, and same with Iran. You are not going to defeat Iran without, you're not going to destroy Iran. You're not going to end Iran without destroying their capacity to export oil. And if you do that, Iran has the power to retaliate against your assets in the Gulf monarchies and in Israel, and they will take with them the entirety of the Middle East oil production offline. And again, that will crash the global economy. And so there's no reason to believe that the United States has changed their fundamental approach towards Iran, and they're now ready to coexist with Iran and live with Iran in peace and mutual prosperity. There's no reason to believe that the United States has this approach towards Iran, towards Russia, or towards China. The West continues to have the same approach to these countries, and it is to, destroy them and weaken them and remove them as an impediment to Western global hegemony. And so until the West gets a real big defeat, we're going to see this continued effort to work their way across the river one step at a time, feeling the stones and recalibrating, adapting to what they discover. So they discovered that Iran is powerful. They've discovered that Iran is not going to be a pushover. They discovered the same thing about Russia. But that doesn't mean that they're done. That doesn't mean that the West is going to surrender their efforts to attain global hegemony. So, I don't know. So my question is, so JD Vance on Saturday in Islamabad, he's going to supposedly talk to some Iranian delegation, to negotiate terms of peace. And it just seems like all of this is a waste of time. I'm not sure Iran is even going to Pakistan at this point, because they're saying, their position is that, the ceasefire included a ceasefire in Lebanon. The ceasefire has already been violated in innumerable ways. And because of that, we are not going to participate. And until the United States pays reparations, until the United States, ends its efforts to control the straits, or agrees that, that Iran is going to control the straits, there's no sense in having any kind of diplomacy. So it remains unclear exactly where Iran is positioning themselves in all of this. I have a lot of confidence in the Iranian government to choose the correct positioning with regard, and I think they know exactly what I'm saying, right? Like, so what I'm saying, I think they are even more crystal clear about that this is just some mindless bullshit. And in the meantime, they're going to continue to export oil as they have been doing. Now, Ian, what about the fact that they are exporting more oil today? Iran is exporting more oil today to China than they were before this war started. Because I believe that's a true statement. And it's interesting, right? That today Iran is sending more oil to China than they were before this conflict started. And I'm wondering, how much longer the West is going to tolerate that. But again, if the West is not going to tolerate that, that's going to be a significant hit to the global economy if they try and say that Iran can't export their oil to China, because again, if they do that, Iran can respond. So the West is.
I mean, this whole China USA animosity or showdown that comes up in every show. I mean, it comes up. Yeah. It comes up in every discussion we have. I just don't see any evidence for it. I mean, you brought up the Marine Corps at the beginning, right? The forced restructuring of the Marine Corps. You brought that at the beginning of the show. For those of you who missed it, basically the Marine Corps got relegated to the Pacific, ostensibly to be a force, a reactionary force to China. Now, if you read the Marine Corps literature from that time period, if you look at what's retired Marine spokesmen and even actively serving officers at the time, they were not happy about that. They argued that the forced restructuring removal of tanks and artillery to be more missile oriented, it made them very reactive rather than proactive. So the Marines themselves did not consider it a good thing. And at the time, I actually wrote an article about it, saying that they lost the Pentagon Wars. There's this feud between the services that happens every year, and I think the Marine Corps they lost. They just lost. They got because it's really, and I think it's actually, unfortunately, I think it's kind of at least a couple years ago when that happened. It wasn't a pivot to China. It was a pivot to Eastern Europe. Eastern Europe is where the money is. It's where those NATO exercises take place. I mean, yeah, there's exercises in the Pacific, but they're not anything like what they have in Europe. I mean, and honestly, who wants to go to the Philippines? I mean, the Philippines is like a cool, jungle warfare experience. But if you want to have fun on a TDY on an assignment, you want to go to Poland, you want to go to the Baltics. Those are fun places to go. And there's a lot of money in it. It's much more profitable. It's a lot more fun to go to Eastern Europe. And the Marine Corps basically got cut out of that. They missed out on that. They didn't get the piece of the Eastern Europe pie. They got stuck in the Pacific.
What was the impetus? Like, why do you think that happened? Like, why did this huge change? Why did all the policies have to change? The procurements have to change. The investments have to change. Like, what was behind all of that? For what purpose?
I think the Marine Corps, because the Marine Corps is it's kind of a weird branch that has to justify its existence, every generation. And in the 1930s, they came up with the island hopping, that, we're going to be this elite amphibious force, which really worked out because it gave them a place in World War II. And they got a lot of street cred and good publicity from that. And the War on Terror, I think they got a little too aggressive, stepping on the Army's toes in the global War on Terror. And I think that is what hurt them, because politics is all about relationships and just political maneuvering with each other. It's stuff above.
You don't think that geopolitics and anything that I'm describing, because
absolutely, there was geopolitics, but I actually think it's the opposite of what you said. It's a pivot against Russia, not a pivot against China. You know, I mean, and honestly, with this Iran thing, who is the first to fall victim to losing weapons? It was the anti-China side of it. You know, they took that THAAD from South Korea. They took munitions and stockpiles from that whole belt of violence in the Pacific. You know, it's the Pacific theater that suffered the most and the loss of radar and anti-missile capabilities. I mean, they did cut off, or at least they said they cut off Patriot missiles to Ukraine, but that was later. That was more than a week into a couple. That was actually a couple of weeks into the war when they announced it. I think at that point they just didn't have a choice. You know, they didn't have enough munitions even for themselves. They had to stop sending them to Ukraine. But the reality is, if they wanted to leave Eastern Europe, they could. I mean, Russia was, I'm sure, gave them. So here's my question for you: if they wanted to leave Eastern Europe so badly, why haven't they already? I'm sure Russia offered them a very good deal to do that. They probably weren't even asking to completely withdraw from Eastern Europe. They just wanted certain security guarantees. So if they wanted to leave Eastern Europe, why didn't they do it already? Because it sounds like when Putin visited Alaska, they got offered a very nice deal, especially if the whole idea is to pivot to China, like you said. Because if you want to pivot to China, you make peace with Russia. That's a very, you know, it's a reverse Soviet-Sino split. You know, so my question is, if they were pivoting to China, why didn't they do it? They've had at least a couple opportunities to do so already.
Yeah, I think, again, I mean, they want to, before they, you know, really focus on China, they have to, you know, set the battlefield, right? So they have to control energy. They have to, so Venezuela, Iran, it's a strategic sequencing, and things have to roll out in a certain way, right? This is their strategy. I mean, it's just interesting. I mean, you know, to me, it's like the idea that China isn't the number one focus and peer rival of the West that is spoken of in all the literature and all their strategic, like. So to me, it's like I'm trying to convince you of something. Hold on, Ian.
I've never. I'm sorry, but I've read in the last couple of years quite a bit of strategic literature, and I've never seen even one that said we're going to pivot to China. I mean, I think there can be a risk in analysis of putting words in people's mouths and setting up a straw man that they didn't actually say. Because I've never, you know, I've seen leftists say it, I've seen Marxists say it, I've seen a lot of different people. Oh, it's a pivot to China. I've never, you know, the people I've never seen mention a pivot to China is the neocons themselves. I've never seen Rubio say that. I've never seen, I've never even seen Blinken.
Yeah.
I've never seen anybody actually say that. So.
No, I get it. And I mean, to me, it's just interesting because I feel as if I'm being tasked with explaining something that from my perspective is not even debatable, you know? And so it's like, where do I begin to make this case? But no, I mean, I get that we've had this long-standing disagreement, and you've always been suspicious of this, you know, this idea that the West ultimately will focus on China, and that all of what is going on now is the precursor. You know, it's the precursor. It's getting things ready for this move to China, and we haven't seen the move to China yet. And so I get why you're suspicious. But it's tough for me to, I wasn't prepared to make this argument because, again, in my mind, like, it's overwhelmingly, undebatably obvious. And so how do I debate somebody how do I explain it to somebody who disagrees? So it's tough. And if I would have known that this was going to come up, I would have, you know, policy papers. I mean, but I mean,
well, I mean, let me put it. I mean, maybe I should frame it this way. So, I mean, I think the first prerequisite, the most important prerequisite for an opponent is for that opponent to actually oppose you on anything. Now, so far, not even going back further than that, but just in the past 5 years, I've not seen any such efforts on China's part, right? They've gone through great pains to actually not oppose the USA on anything. When it came to sanctions on Russia, and the U.S. Treasury told Chinese financial institutions, you're doing this business with a Russian entity. You need to stop. The Chinese institutions always stop. They never say no. They always stop. We can make the argument that they find workarounds, but when those workarounds are discovered, they always shut them down. With Ukraine, China was neutral. They didn't officially. They didn't oppose Russia and Ukraine, but they didn't take their side either. In fact, the Chinese did not even stop dual-purpose exports to Ukraine until after Trump won. And it could be argued they were scared about Russian and American negotiations, and that's why they so suddenly stopped those military exports to Ukraine, because they kind of realized Trump might make a deal with Russia, and they didn't want that to happen. And they wanted to cozy up to Russia more than they had been. Or the most recent example, Cuba. I actually had an argument with, I guess he was a half Chinese guy. He was making this big argument about how China was helping Cuba. I was like, well, how is China helping Cuba? It's like, well, they're sending them, solar panels and rice. I'm not making that, by the way. That's what he actually says. Like, well, it's like, it's cool that they find these products that aren't explicitly sanctioned by the USA. It's like, oh, we will send you stuff that's not explicitly sanctioned by the USA. Well, it would be cool if they would just send them oil. Because oil is what they need. Gasoline is what they need. Natural gas is what they need. How come Russia can send a tanker? It'd be nice if they sent more tankers, but, Russia's in a war. They did at least send one tanker. Why doesn't China? If China's like this big force for good that the USA is afraid of and is pivoting to China, well, where's the opposition? Where is the Chinese opposition? Because I don't even see Chinese opposition. They seem in alignment with them. And it's actually, I would say it's not even that I don't want China to be in opposition to the USA. It's actually frustrating for me because China is so economically entwined with the USA. It is probably the one country on earth that could actually use economic soft power to force things to happen. They could say, hey, we don't want this war in Ukraine. You need to, not support Zelensky and force a peace. China was probably the one country in the world that could do that. With Cuba, they said, hey, we're starving an island of 10 million people basically to death by embargoing them, by blockading them with the U.S. Navy. That's wrong, and there's going to be economic consequences. China, there's a lot of things China could do. I'd be very happy if China did those things, but they don't.
Yeah, okay. No, and I hear this a lot too. They want Russia and China to do more in Gaza, do more in Venezuela, do more in Iran, do more in Cuba. I don't agree with the criticism. I understand where it's coming from, but I think it's coming from a fundamental misunderstanding of the reality of the situation. So again, I think the reality of the situation is Russia and China are not interested in escalating a global conflict. They're not interested in declaring the United States to be their enemy and, plunging the world into a new Cold War. This is not in the interest of humanity, and it's definitely not in the interest of Xi or Putin. And I think, that gets lost on left people in the West who see what the United States is doing and want it to stop and want these other powers to stop them. But, I think you just need to keep in mind that these are the adults in the room, that Xi and Putin are the adults in the room, They understand that, you know, that the United States is dangerous and that they're crazy and that they have capabilities and that they can do things that could be disastrous. And they're, again, and I've said this before many times, you know, their approach is to manage the decline of Western imperialism in a way that has the least catastrophic kind of fallout for humanity and for the global economy. So they're not interested in escalating things. They're not interested in teaching the United States a lesson. They're interested in managing the decline of Western imperialism, improving the planet, and, you know, getting humanity, you know, in a much better situation where, you know, Western imperialism doesn't have the ability to cause the problems they're doing. But, you know, that was to address your most recent point. But I mean, so when I want to, you know, convince somebody that China is seen by the United States as their peer adversary, and that in order to put themselves in a position to defeat their peer adversary, certain things have to be accomplished, right? This is the strategic sequencing. In order to get themselves in the position to be able to wage a successful economic war, maybe hot war, maybe proxy war against their peer adversary, certain things have to happen before they're ready, right? And so those things include, you know, putting, you know, United States Marine Corps in the peer, in the first island chain, you know, to encircle, you know, China in the South China Sea in order to be able to effectively threaten and implement, you know, a trade embargo, right? So that would have to happen before you would just do it, right? And so have we seen that happen, Ian? Like, have we seen expenditures and policies in place? And have we seen troop movements where we are now embedded in the Philippine Islands with, you know, with the Marines and with the Philippine Army? Like, we've seen all that. And so it's not hidden. And so it's just surprising that, you know, nobody takes this obvious into account. So here's a few things. So the evidence that the United States is preparing for a future conflict with China is not hidden. It is openly available in official strategy documents, budget requests, military transformation plans, and operational deployments. Below is a detailed source breakdown of the specific tangible steps the U.S. is taking to prepare for a major war with China. So we see the 2026 National Defense Strategy. Okay, so the 2026 National Defense Strategy, highly influenced by Eldridge Colby, a huge China hawk, talks about China deterrence as the second highest priority. What's the first highest? The first highest is the defense of the United States homeland. So the defense of the United States homeland is the number one priority in the 2026 National Defense Strategy. The second most important priority is China deterrence. So then we have the Force Design 2030. We've already talked about the Force Design 2030, where they're you know, reshaping the United States Marine Corps into a anti-shipping missile force, removing the components of tanks and armor, and also deploying them, right? Deploying them into strategically important locations, ringing China in the first island chain and the second island chain, so they have the ability. Military buildup and strategic deployments, island chain encirclements, the new Trump-class warships. The Trump administration announced plans for a new class of massive missile-heavy battleships to form the centerpiece of a newly envisioned Golden Fleet for the U.S. Navy, explicitly aimed at deterring China. You know, we talked about the Marine Corps Force Design 2030, operationalizing its stand-in force concept, equip the Navy Marine Expeditionary Ship Interdiction System. So this whole Nemesis, this whole Nemesis missile platform is the centerpiece of this redesigning of the U.S. Marine Corps. And then the budgetary focus, 2026 National Defense Authorization Act allocated nearly $900 billion in spending, explicitly directing that 60% of the equipment budget be used in the Indo-Pacific region to counter China's expansion. So, I mean, it's just not hidden. It is not debatable. Like, I mean, you know, I don't know why anybody would want to close their eyes to this reality and pretend that it's, you know, it's not there. or to suggest that everything that they've said, every budget allocation isn't the real story. The real story has to do with things that they're not even talking about, such as, Eastern Europe. So the thing is, the real thing is the United States is handing. Hold on, the United States is handing Eastern Europe to Europe, to Western Europe, in the division of labor. That's a quote from Pete Hegseth when he did his speech last year, to NATO in Europe. It's the division of labor. So we want to have Europe, and I said this at the beginning of the show, slash their welfare states, turn it into a warfare states to handle and contain Russia, and possibly, ask Europeans to start dying once they expend all the Ukrainians, so the U.S. can do what it is, talking about doing in China. But I don't know. Like, I don't really need to convince you specifically that I'm right, but I think it's important for me to make this case of what to me is not even a matter of debate. Like, this is just what's going on. And so it is weird. Like, when we think about all the United States is doing to focus on China, to prepare the battlefield, to invest all their strategy documents, their purchasing things, their policy documents. When we consider all that, and then we think about how the Western press is just silent, right? The Western press isn't talking about this obvious reality that the United States is preparing to plunge the planet into a real situation, against China, the number one trade partner of the entire world, and we're engaging with Iran and Russia. But these things are precursors. Like, this is shaping the battlefield for this future thing. So I think, any rational person that is a liberal and thinks that the liberal press exists to inform the citizenry and tell the citizenry the truth about what's going on. Of course, that's not its use at all. Like, that's not the purpose of the establishment press. But if you're a liberal and you embrace this liberal framework, you should ask yourself, why isn't the Western press explaining this to people? Why aren't they informing people about this inevitable and, soon to happen thing? So, but anyway, Ian, I'm sorry. I mean, I'm grandstanding, I'm soapboxing, and I'm not giving you a chance to respond. But to me, it's just so overwhelmingly obvious. And so that's the problem. That's the struggle I'm having right now, is just trying to explain this to people who deny it, because it just seems undeniable. But I'll be quiet. I'm going to be quiet.
Well, I just look where the actual wars are. So I look where because there is an actual war in Ukraine. They're using the Baltic statelets airspace to strike central Russia, Moscow and St. Petersburg regions, Leningrad region. Iran is a Russian partner. I'll bring up, even actually just about a week ago, the Trump administration admitted that they created that economic crisis that led to the riots that they had armed by starving. I'm not sure exactly how they did it, but basically they starved the supply of US dollars in the Iranian economy, which caused hyperinflation, collapsed their currency. It was obviously very bad for the average person in Iran, and that was the economic chaos that triggered the protests, which turned into riots and armed insurrection and all that. But it was not China that said, okay, we'll send you some dollars. No, it was Russia, which is interesting because Russia is not even in the dollar market, but they still said, okay, we will send you some. I'm not even sure how they did. They sent them some boxes of. I don't know how those macroeconomic moves work, but the end result is Russia sent Iran some of their dollars to prop up their economy. That's what Russia did. I keep hearing that China's well, yes, they're striking Russia. They're striking Russian allies, but China is the real target. Well, I could see the argument that they're going to pivot to China after Russia is defeated, but to say we're going to pivot to China by first defeating Russia, well, why are we calling it pivot to China to begin with? Why not just call it pivot to Russia? Then after Russia is defeated, then they plan to pivot to China.
Okay.
I mean, it's like, you see what I'm saying? The active war, the actual war happening, not the hypothetical war, not the, we want money, we want defense contracts, we want new weapons. The actual wars happening right now are all aimed at Russia. They're the active participants.
Yeah.
I do think you're right that China's. I think actually, and even Russians don't understand how passive China is about it. It's like, if China just keeps backing down every time the U.S. challenges them, they're going to run out of corner to back into. So it would be nice to see China push back a little bit. But, why don't we look at the people who are actually pushing back at the moment?
Well,
Russia's pushing back. Iran's pushing back.
Here's what I hear, Ian. I hear, and I mean, I'm gonna be not kind, but you'll forgive me. So no, I hear that you have an emotional bias, right?
Uh-huh.
You have emotional antipathy towards China, and because you perceive these things to be true about China. So you have certain perceptions that I would say are misperceptions about China. And this gives you an emotional anti-China bias, and you have a strong pro-Russian bias, and you're also in favor of those countries who are being attacked and actually resisting, and so but I don't think that's a good analysis, right? I don't think you can disregard everything that I've said about what the United States says, about what the United States is doing, about the strategic sequencing, about how, in order to put themselves in a position to, actually deal with their peer rival, they have to deal with these other areas first. Like, this is just the strategy that the West is pursuing. And you keep pointing to it and saying, well, look, China's not doing anything because they're not being attacked. And so why would they be attacked? And to me, there's just a huge disconnect and a huge a gap in, strategic analysis going on. And I think it's, because I think you have an emotional bias against China and an emotional bias in favor of Russia. And that explains kind of, your point of view. But, I'm not compelled by that. And I'm more interested in, what seems to be actually going on based on everything the United States is saying and what they're actually doing. And also, I think there's a much more charitable explanation for what's going on that doesn't mean that China is passive or weak or those those terms. Like, I'm going to reject those terms, and I'm going to say it's a misunderstanding of the reality. But again, I don't know. We don't have to solve this. You don't have to agree with me but I think inevitably, very soon we will see a pivot to China. Once they can, do their best to isolate the Iran situation, isolate the Russian situation. They're trying very hard right now to pivot to China. But thankfully, Russia is not making it easy. Russia is not just being pushed over, and neither is Iran. And again, I mean, this is what we've been talking about for a long time. And it does benefit China tremendously that the West is pursuing this strategy. And I trust China to make the to do what is best for China and for humanity, really, just like I trust Iran to do what's best, and Russia. And I really think that Putin and Xi are tight, and I think they have a very even better understanding of the situation than I've explained, but it's the same understanding that I've explained, and that they're working together to do, what I explained, is to manage the decline of Western imperialism, manage this rampaging beast, this that's very dangerous, and so they don't want to escalate. They don't want to go to a thermonuclear war where we start using nukes on everyone. Like they want to avoid that, and I think this is the biggest explanation, and they know time is on their side. So I think there's a lot of room for optimism. I think it's clear that the West is not going to win this. But I don't think it's fair or correct to say that that China isn't the ultimate target, or that China is somehow being too submissive and being a pushover and being weak by not doing more than what they're doing. But like I said, we can agree to disagree. And maybe we should have a guest on Tuesday that can be a moderator between us and can help facilitate this discussion. And but where do you want to go? I mean, I appreciate the opportunity just to explain things how I truly believe they are, and you're forcing me to defend them. And so
Yes.
I'm more than happy to, and I think it's easily defensible because I think it's so obvious. But what do you think about? I mean, do you think Iran is going to send a delegation to talk with Vance on Saturday? Because I'm hearing conflicting reports that on the one hand they're saying no because the United States is not abiding by the ceasefire agreement, but other people say, well, they will, just because they're going to entertain this process because they don't want to be able to be depicted by the Western press as the intransigent warmongering faction that refuses peace. So I don't know where to land on this one. I'm not sure what's going to happen Saturday.
I would be astonished. I'd be completely astonished if Iran is the first to drop the negotiation ball. Right? I would be astonished if that happens, and the reason why is because their country is on the line. The USA as a country, as a nation state, is not on the line because it's not the USA being bombed, and as of right now, the USA cannot even hypothetically be bombed by Iran. So the USA,
Right,
as a people and as a country, are not on the line. Israel, well, I can't say I understand Israel. It's just the most hysterical, like, hive mind I've ever seen. But the reality with Israel is that they don't seem to have a very good sense of self-preservation. It might be just because if Israel just got bombed to hell, they would go back to Poland, to Russia, to Germany, to the USA, back to their actual countries. So they don't feel like, they don't look at the cities and the infrastructure, feel like it's something that they're tied to, and they couldn't leave if things got hard enough. So when you have a country, when you're dealing with a country that's not at stake, and a country that is at stake but doesn't care because they have somewhere else to go to, well, it's difficult because if Iran does not come up with a deal with the USA, it's going to come back to Iran being bombed again. And they can, of course, bomb USA bases back. They can bomb Israeli cities. They can bomb Israeli desalination plants, Israeli power plants. They can hurt Israel a lot, but that doesn't stop Iran from getting hurt. And I think just at the end of the day, they would be very happy for the war to just be over. The problem is that I think by now, especially now that they have more radical, less liberal leadership in charge, because the liberal leadership was literally bombed by the USA and Israel, they kind of realize that if they don't push hard enough, if they don't, the USA, they're just going to be the go-to punching bag for every U.S. president that's having that midterm, low approval rating crisis. They're just like, oh, well, I'll just bomb Iran because they're easy. That's an easy way to get people popped. So I understand they want to hurt the USA and the U.S. interests enough, so they're like, well, that sucked. We don't want to do that again. So give it a bloody nose. So they don't want to do that again. But I don't think they have like this idea that, oh, we're gonna, we're this great force for good is going to go blah blah blah. I think they just want to bring the war to an end in a way that's not likely to come back again. And they're in a good position if war does come back. So they're not going to agree with like Rubio's, just disband their missile, which is it's crazy that Rubio even thinks that was ever a plausible thing to get them to agree to. And it actually, that's why I don't believe that at the beginning of the show, I mentioned that New York Times article that's trying to paint Rubio as like a voice of reason. Well, I don't buy it because I think he did genuinely believe Iran would collapse and could be made to just because he was saying that. Why? I mean, because if he thought the war was stupid, why would he so overtly say things he knew were stupid? This is why I think everybody bought into the Israel lobby's argument and were surprised when it didn't work out. But I do think at this point the U.S. wants to get out of the Iran war. So I think there's a chance that these negotiations will go somewhere. The bigger question is, Israel. It may be necessary to just cut out Israel and just say, you know what? And that's why I suggested in my first article on Tuesday. I said, it's possible for Iran and the USA to make a deal. And explicitly says if Israel is not a part of this deal, if Israel bombs you and you bomb Israel, that's not the USA's business. The USA is not going to get involved. I don't know how likely that is to happen because it's requiring a lot. It's required because I don't buy the idea that Israel is just expendable proxy. I think they're literally every American school child has grown up hearing about the Holocaust every day of his life. That all white people in the world are Jews because we're evil and we hurt the poor Jews during World War II and they're the biggest victims who ever lived. We have to give our whole country to help them because they're like God's chosen people. When I remember the day I was in Sunday school. I was a little kid. I was like 11. Now our Sunday school teacher, he went up and he said that, in the end times, Russia and China are going to, he actually said Russia and China, this was like, I guess 1998, something like this. But anyways, Russia and China are going to send soldiers to help the Arabs invade Israel, and that's going to be the Battle of Armageddon, and it's kind of crazy to think about, but this is the culture the Americans grew up with. So
no, I've had the same experience.
It's asking a lot for the U.S. to institutionally give up Israel. I'm not sure it can happen. Even if Israel wrecks the deal and the USA wants to get out of it.
The U.S. obviously wouldn't sacrifice Israel unless it meant, that by sacrificing Israel, they would be able to attain global hegemony. And then, of course, they would just build Israel right back because they would have global hegemony. But it's you said a lot of interesting things that I had a lot of thoughts, responses that I have since forgotten.
I would want to close by saying, before you respond, I do want to mention that I've seen the media report seems to really paint Vance as unhappy with Israel. And they paint, like the New York Times article said that trip to Azerbaijan, like even when that trip to the Caucasus, when Vance was to get, it seems like a waste of time. Why is Vance wandering around the Caucasus? Even at the time, I was like, what is the point? Why is he wasting his time doing that? And then this New York Times article said they were deliberately wasting his time so he wouldn't be present when they did these talks with Israel to start the war with Iran. That's what the New York Times article said. Now, that part might not be a lie. It's possible because I've always kind of felt he was the least Well, he was the least retarded person in the administration. I always kind of had that feeling about him. So it's possible he's annoyed with Israel. And he's leading the. So I don't know. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens this weekend.
Yeah.
But I'm more positive. Most people, like almost everybody's extremely pessimistic about it. I'm leaning more on the optimistic side. I'm more leaning towards it's going to bear fruition. That's my feeling.
Yeah, I don't see how the United States can, just, agree to live in peace and mutual prosperity with Iran. And I don't see Iran giving up their support for Hezbollah or the Palestinians, or, allowing greater Israel to just, continue to take shape, while the current government of Iran is in charge. And so so what I think is going to happen is, like we read today about Keir Starmer suggesting that, a 30 nation force is being constructed to really escalate the war against Iran. And so we're just buying time. This is a lull. And this is a lull because the United States kind of expended all of the munitions it had on the two carrier groups. It did bring, 2 other Marine Expeditionary Units into the theater, but they don't even know what targets to hit, right? And so there's the lull. There's the fake diplomacy. And the U.S. they're assessing the situation, and they're going to come up with a strategy to, really try to deal with Iran and be able to finish it so they can move on to bigger fish. And so this is what is going on right now. They're trying to come up with some kind of strategy. And again, thankfully, Iran has been strong, just like Russia has been strong, and they have thwarted these efforts by the West to destroy them and to just attain an easy global hegemony. And just imagine, like, if Russia was destroyed, if they were balkanized and the regime changed, and the same thing happens in Iran, China's probably toast. Over time, there's like nothing to stop, the United States from just doing the same thing to China. And so, this is a war against the resistance to Western hegemony. And that resistance is strongest in Iran, Russia, and China. And, the West hasn't given up, their desire to have global hegemony. They haven't acknowledged that they're going to have to accept multipolarism. They are resisting multipolarism. They are trying to maintain their hegemony. And so we're going to see, bigger escalations against Iran. There is no doubt in my mind that there will not be a peace agreement that is worth anything, that lasts for any amount of time. And it's going to be, asymmetric warfare. It's going to be like, the Syria or what happened in Syria. We didn't get regime change with Assad right away, but over years, the economy was destroyed, and there was things happening behind the scenes to undermine the strength of their military and to undermine their economy. And, over years, it was able to actually succeed. Iran is going to be much, much, much more difficult. And they don't have years when it comes to Iran. They don't have years. And so I expect a very quick escalation, and it's going to be bloody. There's going to be body bags, Western body bags, a lot more. And, exactly when or how this plays out, nobody knows for sure, but we can obviously see the obvious trajectory, and we can have certainty that, as long as Iran resists, they're going to be attacked. And the thing is, I don't know if there is a military solution to Iran. I don't know what the West can do other than just destroying all the energy infrastructure in Iran and doing the Stone Age civilization killing threats that Trump threatened on Tuesday. Like, that's really their only option. And that has major catastrophic consequences and side effects that aren't going to be good for the West. And so in this titanic struggle between Western imperialism and those countries that resist, the countries that resist are doing very well. And I think their victory is inevitable because the West simply doesn't have the cards to play. And that's the reality of it. But go ahead, Ian.
I don't think they actually have the ability to do the, I mean, because we had the End Civilization show on Tuesday. It would require, and I said it, that it would require nuclear weapons, but it seems really unlikely because that would almost certainly start a nuclear war, because you can't let one nuclear power just decide to nuke people because they don't like them, which is, it would start a nuclear exchange almost certainly. But if it's not nukes and it's just conventional weapons, the USA can't, bomb Iran back to the Stone Age. Especially now after so many of their munitions.
No, what about destroying all their oil production infrastructure, their oil production and exportation infrastructure? They haven't hit it, and Iran has said, if you do hit it, we're going to hit the oil infrastructure of the Gulf, and that has not happened, but that can happen, and I think it will happen.
It's a country of 90 million people. If you bombed the oil infrastructure, they would bomb our oil infrastructure, and that would suck. And then they would fix it, and then, we've seen this play out in Ukraine and Russia. They have more or less the same weapons on both sides, and that's what we're seeing. You bomb the hell out of a power plant. Well, what usually happens? Is out for a few days or a few weeks at most, and then they fix it. Same thing with all summer we're hearing about how Russia was going to run out of gasoline because they were bombing all these refineries. Well, they would blow up these tanks and these machines. There'd be big explosions that they would show in all the Western press. A few days later, those plants would be operating again. I mean, if you look at World War II, like when they bombed the Romanian oil fields, for example, those were they literally sent hundreds of planes to bomb basically every square meter of that facility, just a wave of bombs. We don't even have the munitions. They literally don't exist to do that to every Iranian facility. The infrastructure can't be done without nukes. The reason we don't have that many munitions is because we have nukes now, because it's pointless to have that many.
So let me paraphrase what you're saying. So you're suggesting that the United States has hit a brick wall. They were not aware that Iran would be so strong, and now that they realize how strong Iran was, they're going to back off and they're going to work towards multipolarism and give up their agenda to have total global hegemony. I hope you're right.
Well, it's a change because I kept saying I did not see an off ramp for Trump. I did not see an off ramp for Trump. They're just going to keep escalating and escalating, but it does look like they found an off ramp. It does look like they found an off ramp. And if worst case scenario, they can oust Trump and say it was his fault.
I think if they wanted an off ramp, Israel would be on board, and they would come to some peace settlement. But the United States is not ready for a peace settlement that Iran can stomach.
No, Israel isn't. Israel's not, because Israel's even what you said at the beginning of the show, that Israel is dependent on the USA, and that's actually well, it's true, and the reason it's true is because of Iran. Israel needs the USA because Iran exists, but their U.S. support is declining, and it's dying off. People under 40 generally don't either.
Yeah, so we have there you are. Okay, you're back. We lost you for a second.
I'm back. But so people under, it's a generational thing. It's been pulled over and over. Like white Christian men over 60 are basically the only people left who don't hate Israel, basically. The most recent polls showed like over almost 80% of Democrats are against Israel, and Actually, I don't remember the statistic for Republicans. I think it was actually more than half.
So it would be very easy for the United States to force Israel to do something if they wanted them to do it. And so this idea that they can't, to me, I don't buy it. I think that's theater. I think it's theater served up to exculpate, the United States from its, its actual.
Well, let's play a thought experiment here. Let's say the absolute best case scenario happened is the USA and Iran made an amicable peace agreement that held. Israel, wouldn't you say Israel at that point would be screwed? I mean, they'd be completely screwed. Even just it would be a question if they would even be able to exist as a state.
Yeah,
if that happens.
Absolutely.
So I mean, if they're literal. Okay, so you agree with that?
Absolutely.
So if their literal existence as a state is on the line here, don't you think they would be pretty motivated to ruin any peace deal between Iran and the USA?
Well, so again, like I'm not sure. So the United States could force a peace agreement. The United States could force a two-state solution with Israel and the Palestinians. The United States could force an agreement between Israel and Iran that guaranteed Israel's existence. Like it can do that, but it doesn't want to. So I'm saying that, yeah, I mean, if what the United States wanted to do was different than what it was, things would be different. There's no doubt. But that's not an actual argument. Like, I mean, yes, if the United States decided that they were willing to have a just peace, on the planet, like they could force Israel to abide by that just peace. But they're not. They don't want a just peace. They want hegemony. And so,
okay, but you say, I mean, Israel, I mean, they could force, I mean, you keep saying, okay, they could force Israel to accept the deal. Well, how can they force Israel to accept the deal if it would destroy Israel, if the deal would destroy Israel? Because, I mean, because I mean, as soon as that no-fly zone is lifted, don't you think pretty much, I mean, some percentage of the population wants to escape, even just regardless of how the war turns out? There's a certain population of Israel that just wants to leave, is going to book.
So in your hypothetical, the United States allies with Iran, right? In your hypothetical, the United States allies with Iran and it turns on Israel.
I didn't say that, just an amicable peace. I mean,
no, okay, but I'm saying, so that's you're just saying, like, if the United States flips alliances in a hypothetical and Israel becomes the enemy and Iran becomes our ally and the United States works with Iran to destroy Israel, Israel's going to be destroyed. So what's your hypothetical? I mean, if we want to go through this intellectual exercise, tell me your hypothetical once again.
Okay, so right now, Israel is just a country that's constantly at war, is bombed pretty extensively, is not safe. The only reason to stay there is because there's this promise that we're going to defeat Iran and establish Greater Israel. And we'll become, this big goal. That's the only reason, for anyone to actually want to stay in Israel right now, is Greater Israel, because they'll defeat Iran and it will be safe again. Well, if they turn around and say, well, Iran is not defeated, the USA gave up, who's going to want to keep sitting there and do this routine of having to hide in bomb shelters and just live in this economically desolate place, surrounded by people who hate them? I don't. Well, and again, Dust says because the U.S. could end Israel by simply stopping aid. Well, that's the whole point. If they defeat Iran, if they broke up Iran, they would not need it. They would not need the USA anymore, because they need the USA because Iran exists. If Iran stopped existing, Israel would become a world power, it would not be dependent on the USA anymore. But if the war fails, I think Israel is toast. And the reason they're toast is because the U.S. Support is going to end when the baby boomers die off. Nobody in the USA likes Israel anymore. You see what I'm saying?
No. I mean, it's the standard liberal perspective where you're thinking in terms of nation states, and you're not understanding the actual dynamics that are at play. Which is a transnational oligarch elite that dictates policy and does not give a fuck, what people actually want or think, right? Like, that's just the reality of the situation. And so your hypothetical kind of just describes, hey, in this alternate universe, if things were totally different, this could happen, right? And I'm like, okay, sure. But, we're talking about the real world and the actual context here, where the United States is totally the guarantor of Israeli existence. And so Israel is an appendage of the United States. And so to think that, Israel is like some entity that has sovereignty and that can, do anything that the United States doesn't want it to do is just, it's a different universe than the one that exists. Right. So like, in your hypothetical, you're just imagining a different kind of universe that doesn't really exist. And you're asking me to, in this situation, like, wouldn't this be this? And I'm like, okay. But in the actual situation,
well, I mean, you say that. I mean, it's actually, I think it's similar to our arguments about Iranian infrastructure. It's like Marxists and actually neoconservatives both have this idea that it's like you heard the term, the means of production. Then just imagine, well, there's this infrastructure. Once you destroy this infrastructure, that country stops existing. But you know what? Every country is literally just a population pool. So even if you destroyed every building, every single building in Iran, every single one, and in the next 5-10 years they would rebuild it because it's 90 million people. It's a huge, insanely huge number of people. I mean, Russia's 150 million. USA is 360 million. It's not a small country. So you can't just bomb some stuff and then that country stops existing because it's the people. I mean, it's the same thing with this idea. Oh well, there's this transnational. I mean, yes, there's to an extent transnational elites, but they are. They're not robots. They're not or Martians from another planet. I hate to quote Mitt Romney, but corporations are people too. Literally, if every person, to an extent, yes, the rich are in that population pool. So pretty much everybody under 40 and 30 hates Israel, just like Israel is this terrible country that is working against us. When the people who do like Israel all die, well, who are these people who are going to say, well, we're going to keep supporting Israel? Who are they? Are they robots? Are they from a different planet?
It's the class. It's the ownership class. It's the billionaire class. Iran calls them the Epstein class, and they're transnational. They don't have allegiance to the American people. They don't care what the American people want. They pursue their own hegemonic class interests, utilizing the weapons of individual states and the militaries of individual states. And then they have this propaganda apparatus that cajoles and coerces and manipulates populations to go along with it by telling the population that, hey, this is in our best interest. And they also want to just reduce people to ignorance and divide people ideologically and culturally. So this is how they maintain their empire. This is how they pursue their double agenda of pretending to be a representative government of the United States population while they only really represent the transnational oligarchy and pursue those oligarch interests, without any concern of morality or justice, and without really caring. I mean, they care about, coercing the populations into going along with it, but ultimately they're going to do what they have to do to further their interests. I mean, and so Israel, to see the reality, to understand reality in terms of individual nation states that all have sovereignty and are just trying to further their own state interests, like that's a fundamentally flawed way of looking at reality. But if you use that framework, you can only result to the conclusions that you've resulted in understanding. There's nation states, and these are the primary actors. So it makes sense that you think that, well, look, right now, Israel, the nation state of Israel, has control over the nation state of the United States policy, and they're using the United States to further the nation state of Israel's interests. And I'm just saying that's not really a good way of understanding things. The better way of understanding things is a global class struggle where you have some Western oligarchs who are trying to free the world and secure the world, so there's no obstacles to their freedom to do whatever they want to do. They want control of all the governments, all the resources, and all the markets on the planet. Iran is an impediment. Russia is an impediment. China is an impediment. And so they're devising strategies to overcome those obstacles, to overcome those impediments. That is what is going on. And that is why, the idea that there's going to be some kind of a peaceful coexistence with Iran, that the ceasefire and the diplomacy that supposed to happen on Saturday is ever going to go anywhere is just not true. Because the United States and the West, I think, are going to just look for opportunities to do to Iran what they did to Syria, to do what Russia, they would have liked to do a long time ago, and then to really focus and work on dealing with China. And so there's a strategy for that. We've talked about the strategy. It's a three-pronged strategy where Western Europe is going to take over having to deal with Eastern Europe. The United States, as soon as it can possibly manage, is going to pivot to China. And Iran, they need to hurry up and deal with Iran. And so we're going to see whatever their strategy is to deal with Iran. I don't think the West is going to succeed. I think Iran is too strong. I think Russia is too strong, and China is way too fucking strong. And China won this titanic battle 10 years ago. So really what Iran and Russia and China are trying to do is trying to, get through this transition period from unipolar hegemony of the United States to a multipolar world, without initiating World War III, without initiating a global economic catastrophe, and without initiating, a nuclear destruction. So, unfortunately, the West has a lot to say about how their decline happens. And so, it's obvious what's happening, the trajectory of what's happening, but it's not so obvious, what the United States is trying to do, what the West is going to do. But they're making plans, and every day, we have new information. So Keir Starmer says a 30-country coalition is being developed to fucking open the Strait of Hormuz. That's reinforcing what I'm saying.
I don't think it's going to happen. Well, you know what? Let's reconvene on Tuesday.
Yeah.
We're going to reconvene on Tuesday. I need to pee. We're going to reconvene on Tuesday. We're going to see who's right. So
I want to thank you.
You're pessimistic and I'm optimistic. It's very good. I mean, it's more nuanced than that. I get it, but it's a good binary to stage the next show.
Yeah.
An optimistic one and a pessimistic.
No, and even if nothing happens on the diplomatic front, that still doesn't mean you're wrong. I mean, we wouldn't expect everything to happen over one weekend, but but we can definitely see. And it's probably not easy for you to deal with my single-minded, narrow-minded, obstinate framework, and it's probably not that fun to listen to me go, over and over, repeat myself. So I appreciate you being my co-host and having this platform, and then all the listeners. Sometimes I wonder why anybody listens. I honestly,
we have a good audience tonight.
But we do have live guests, and every once in a while, one of our programs just gets really good traction on YouTube, and we get thousands of views for some reason. So anyway, Solidarity Dust. I saw a lot of people, Jace Hart, Todd Doherty, Daryl. We're going to have a discussion with Daryl soon, hopefully. And yeah, so we'll reconvene. Me and Ian will reconvene on Tuesday. Thank you everyone for watching, and we will see you then.